Hey everybody, welcome back to the Senators Roundtable. I'm your host Jacob Billington, joined by my fantastic co-hosts Dayton Reimer and Paul Quinney. It's been a while; it's been 2 weeks since we've talked, and there's been surprisingly quite a bit of Sens news. And we're going to definitely talk about that. But first of all, how was your holiday break, guys? Dayton?
It's good. Yeah. Got to get away for a little bit and then just sort of took it easy. Very
Yeah,
refreshing, very recharging. I'm sure you, fellow teacher, understand the power of a nice 2 week break. So it's been great.
it was good, and I'm excited to get back to the school though.
Hmm.
Yeah, Paul, how are you?
Hey, it's great. Ate too much, drank too much, all the usual Christmas and New Year's stuff. But glad it's over. Time to get back to the grindstone here.
Yeah, life goes on as usual every single year. So the biggest news out of Ottawa, I mean, outside of the PWHL kicking off, which is fantastic. I've got the game on over on the TV. Um, I'm really excited to watch that league. We're not going to talk too much about it today. We're going to kind of let them get their feet wet, and then we'll maybe talk a little bit about it next week. See how things go for Ottawa this week. But in terms of the Senators, there's been weird amount of change. So Dayton and I got into a little bit of a conversation on Twitter four days ago or so, and we were talking about the new general manager of the team and how that needs to be one of the New Year's resolutions. And I said, that's not going to happen until the summer. It's hard to get the guy you want. In my mind, I'm thinking like Matthew Darsh, probably top of the list, and you're not going to be able to pry him out of Tampa Bay until the summer. And then, like 2, 3 days later, Steve Staios is named full time general manager. Now, I don't know if that'll last forever. They might bring in more bodies, they might move that. But he was announced as the general manager and president of hockey operations. And then Dave Poulin was brought in as senior vice president. So you do still kind of get that two-headed monster. I think he just doesn't have the experience to officially be named president of hockey ops, but he's right there with Staios making those decisions. Um, and Ryan Bowness, he was promoted to associate general manager from assistant general manager, and he's still going to be running Belleville at least for the rest of this year. And he's just going to have some more say and stuff. He's going to do more NHL scouting like he was doing in Pittsburgh. A lot of changes, but not a lot of change, if that makes any sense. Let's just kind of dive right into it. What do you think of the move? We'll start with you on this one, Paul.
Let me ask you a question, Jacob. Did you get all the egg off your face on that prediction on your general manager before it dried? I was just checking a little around there. You may want to check that, but couldn't resist getting that one in. Hey, it happens. What was your question? What do I think about all this?
Yeah, just like what do you think of the moves? More so, nothing really changed other than bringing in Dave Poulin. So, what do you think of that hiring?
Eh, I mean, he's been out of the game for a long time. I was surprised, the time between his what was he, VP of hockey operations with the Leafs, and then after that he went to TSN. He's been a commentator there for a long time, essentially out of the game. But generally well regarded, knowledgeable hockey man. So yeah, no strong opinions on that. I think they're trying to round out the bench. They're bringing all the talent that they can get on board. I don't think they're cheaping out. And if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you should feel good about that. They're bringing in, all the guns that they can, and they need it. Let's.
Yeah, and it's weird. I saw somebody compare it to the Eugene Melnick regime where they just keep moving internal pieces around, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. They just hired Jacques Martin, they hired Steve Staios, they hired now Dave Poulin, a couple other people behind the scenes. This is new stuff. We're bringing in a lot of people. People are comparing this to the Pierre Maguire hiring, which I don't see it all. Just because they were analysts, are you going to compare Rick Tocchet to the Pierre Maguire hiring as well? Like
Yeah.
everybody that's not in the game that should be is on a panel somewhere talking. Now Poulin's been there for quite a while, and I was actually kind of surprised to see how like divided people were on his thoughts. I thought he was generally like one of the most liked people, and people always agree with him and stuff. But I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying that they don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that he says. But Dayton, do you want to chime in on this?
Uh, Not a lot to add. I was kind of underwhelmed with all of it.
Yeah.
Seeing that Staios just took the interim tag off himself and now is full GM. Okay, great. Uh, Dave Poulin, sure, he knows hockey stuff. I can't recall any of his takes from the last 10 years. Didn't really make an impression with me. There's some guys that really resonate for better or worse. He was not for me.
Yeah.
I also haven't watched a lot of live hockey in those last 10 years, just thanks to streaming and prices and the lovely system we all live in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just sort of to sum it all, it was underwhelming. I don't think it was a bad move, but yeah, getting some new faces in there. It seems like you're adding a lot of guys who have increasingly long titles.
Yep.
Okay, we all know what an assistant GM is. What's an associate GM? Like that's a made up term.
Yeah.
I saw someone on Twitter compare it to assistant general assistant general manager in the office to assistant to the general manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know is not correct, but it was funny, so I like that.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
no, I think you can take some heart if you're an Ottawa Senators fan in that there seems to be a process here. I was listening to the press conference, and Andlauer starts out typical corporate speak. Hey, we've been here 100 days. Here's the next step. Melnick, those years were never like that. It was fire from the hip. He might have had a plan, maybe he didn't, but the way Andlauer is speaking and going about things, it suggests to me that he's got a vision and a plan. And hey, if individuals don't work out where he slots them, it doesn't mean the plan or the vision is invalid. You just get somebody else who's a better fit. So if you're a believer in, kind of a corporate way of doing things, then this is what you've got with this organization now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
process driven, I think, is a
Yeah.
nice change for the Senators because
Right.
it's like you mentioned, just it hasn't been for years under the Melnick regime. It's been kind of just do whatever you want and bring in the guys you like and get rid of the ones you don't. And yeah, it was a mess, and you end up losing a draft pick and hiring Pierre McGuire. It's just strange stuff. And if you're catching a lot of this corporate speak, I think, yeah, maybe it's supposed to be underwhelming, right? Like this is just how things are done, and Senators fans may not be familiar with the actual process. Sort of saying that tongue in cheek.
Senators fans are used to going on Facebook Marketplace, buying a $400 Hyundai Accent. Now we're going through the financing options with the bank. We're going and getting the bigger package. We're going through the whole dealership process right now, rather than just the Facebook Marketplace, which is sometimes the marketplace can get you by for a few months, even a few years, but long term you need to go to the dealership.
Yeah, bartering is exciting, that's for sure.
With almost.
So there's one. So Dayton, you said that you don't recall many takes from Poulin over the last decade or so, which is fair. He's not one of like the biggest faces of TSN, but there is one that he mentioned 2 weeks ago now, and it was while he was on TSN 1200. He said that if he had a say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but if he had a say in the Senators' coaching look around, it would be Craig Berube, number one man for the job. Do you think that he carries any weight bringing that opinion into the organization? And if he does, what do you think of hiring Berube as the new Senators head coach? We'll start with you on this one, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at his record. So, okay, so for some of the pros, he has actual NHL experience, played 17 years in the league, head coach in Philly. But let's look at that. He came in the first year, I think it was 2013, and they fired him 18 months later. So there's a bit of a bump up for the Flyers when he came in that 2013-14 season. They made the playoffs, but the next year they didn't. So kind of overwhelming there. And, sure, he won a Stanley Cup in St. Louis his first year and was in the running for Jack Adams. But, to wax maybe too cynical here, I think he was riding a young goaltender by the name of I always get him confused with you.
Yeah.
Bennington.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so how much of that was Berube and how much of it was Bennington? I don't know. But all I know is that then the following year, following 2 years, he coached them right out of the first round. Third year there, he was eliminated, or they were eliminated after the second round. So, not much to distinguish him in St. Louis. So if could talk to Poulin, I'd say, well, why Berube? I mean, there's plenty of choices. Why would you zero in on him? It just wasn't clear to me.
Yeah. What I like about his system is that he makes his team play like a bunch of jerks. And Ottawa can do that. They did that through the rebuild. They don't do that anymore. They're not hard to play against. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. But another thing, St. Louis was kind of at the end of their potential window, in my opinion. Obviously, they lost Pietrangelo right after they won the cup. They lost some other pieces. Their defense every year has just gotten significantly worse. Like you look at Parayko's downfall, all these guys like Justin Falk, Robert Bortuzzo, he was great in those playoffs. Just some of these guys, and they just fell off a cliff. Now, not all of them fell right off a cliff, but they weren't as great. Then they lost Vince Dunn. That defense just went through so much, whether it's change or regression. I don't fault him for I don't want to say failures, but the failures of the last 3 years, that they didn't win the Stanley Cup. Obviously, any year that you don't win a cup is a failure. Depends on where your priorities are at. But they went through a lot of change. I don't blame him. They didn't have a great roster after winning the cup. And I do think that he would be a good guy that would fit this Senators group. Dayton, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, Jacob. He seems very much like the older Senators, at least of this group, right? He, for those who don't know, played a very long career where he was the worst. He was just a guy who beat up other guys, and he was very good at it. And he did it for over 1,000 games. Like that's some tenacity.
Chris Neil.
Yeah. Yeah. Same kind of vein, but did so in the 90s.
Yeah.
Where you'd had to just kind of beat up everybody anyways. Yeah. Gotta love that clutch and grab hockey. But yeah, he coaches very similarly to how he played, which is intense. Yeah. Right? He has a high level of demands and very intense, very, aggressive style. And so when he was brought into St. Louis, they sort of did a 180 very quickly because he brought in this very intense, very rigorous system. And that's kind of what they needed. You compare the stats of their top guys in St. Louis between like before he came there and after he got there, it doesn't change much. Like you didn't get a whole bunch of extra points. You didn't get a whole bunch of extra penalty minutes. What you got was a bunch of the depth guys performing better.
Yep.
And one of the comments that was made on a few sources that I was looking up was that he's similar to like a Ken Hitchcock or John Tortorella, but those guys are ones that have big overarching systems. Everyone plays defense, or everyone does this. Berube has a more individualized system where he's able to talk to the guys and get to know what they need to do and get the best out of them. And that's why he was so successful in St. Louis, I think. But guys like that wear out their welcome very quickly. So the fact that he was fired this year is no surprise. And the fact that St. Louis was starting to regress was also no surprise. That's what happens with those very intense coaches. Like that's how a Sutter coaches every single team. You can't have them for more than 3 years. And that's also a famous Larry Bird quote. A coach lasts 3 years and then you replace him.
Yeah.
That's how it works. So I think if the Senators are looking at Berube, then the time to get him is now.
Yeah.
You need him in your team, changing things, implementing his system, because the minute you bring him in is the minute you start competing.
Yep.
And this is a team that can compete. They've shown they can. They just don't for some reason. The depth guys are always a problem. The defense is an issue. The goaltending is an issue. The forwards aren't scoring. And somehow the face of the franchise, Brady Tkachuk, is not being Brady Tkachuk. Like, this team has lost the identity that they forged around their captain. You bring in Berube, that changes immediately. So if you want that, and I think the Senators do, I think that's why Poulin is in there. It's, I think, strangely convenient that he made that comment 2 weeks ago and now is with the team.
Right.
Yeah, I think that immediately becomes a top guy. You bring him in quick, and you'll get a team that will compete for a playoff spot this year. Maybe not make it, but I think they could make some damage if he's in quickly.
Yeah. And well, you look at all the things that Berube did with St. Louis, and like you said, it can translate very well to Ottawa. Just with the way that the teams were fairly similar. I know I said that St. Louis was at the end of their window or getting there, but the teams are built pretty similar. Ottawa's just a younger version of that, except for Tarasenko, who would be the same but older version. But yeah, like you look at the success he had, and it's not impossible to happen in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Paul?
Well, just a couple of things. I mean, one is why rush? You're not going to be a playoff team here. I think the focus now is on 2024, 25. Let's face it. So, do you really have to rush a decision like this? And I'd probably go farther afield in trying to identify and evaluate candidates. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago on 5 candidates who could replace DJ Smith if they ended up firing him, and of course they have. One that came to the top of my list was Claude Julien. He's got a cup. He took the Bruins 2 years. That was 2011. Took the Bruins in 2013 to the final. He's got a Jack Adams. He's got the pedigree, and he's also very defensively oriented, which is evidently what this team needs, or at least one of the things they need. But interestingly, he hasn't come up as a coach of interest here. And then the other one I was intrigued by after I looked into it, because you, Dayton, and Jacob, you both suggested this guy, was Brad Berry at University of North Dakota. And, checking him out, I thought, you know what, this guy could be an intriguing choice. But so I'd be a little surprised if what do I know? If Berube were quickly selected, he might get there eventually. But yeah.
Well, one reason that I suggested they need to hire him quickly is I don't think the Senators can afford to waste another season. This season's already gone. They're shooting for a high draft pick, and I think that's very obvious. But this team was built to compete. And if you don't capitalize on that, I mean, Giroux is gone after his contract ends. Tarasenko is gone. You're not getting him for the price tag that you got him at. There's a number of other guys who lose another year on their fairly affordable deals. That, every year wasted just takes another year away from that competitive window. And like it or not, this team was built to compete now. So I think they have to kind of capitalize on that. And Berube maybe isn't the best choice for a coach, but he might be the most effective in the short term. And, maybe that's not a bad thing.
Macklin Celebrini would be a fantastic add to Ottawa. So would Cole Eiserman or any other top 5 pick or whoever you want to pull out of the hat. This team would benefit so much more from a run at the playoffs. They don't have to make the playoffs, but how many games do they have left? 50, 51? If they win 30 of those games, that is a huge success for this team. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. That's pretty much out of the question. I think everywhere has them at like under a 5% chance, but win as many games as possible, develop a winning culture, even though you might not make the playoffs. This team needs to focus on winning right now. Like you said, Dayton, this team is built to win right now. Unfortunately, they're not. And that needs to change because 7 years of losing, Brady Tkachuk has never played a meaningful game. Like that's ridiculous. Tim Stützle, obviously, he's one of the fresher Senators, but he's so good and has not played a meaningful game. You don't want these guys to end up like Jeff Skinner, who just played his 1,000th game and hasn't had a playoff game yet.
I didn't know that. That sucks.
Yeah, that does suck, eh?
He's paid like he's played it.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking, look, face up the reality. You're not going to make the playoffs this year. So there's a bunch of pieces that I think you could look at moving. My question is, will the Senators be a seller at trade deadline? Maybe some acquisitions that you can pull in. Bottom six for me is, for the most part, dispensable. I'd be looking at whatever you've got here now. It's not a winning team, is it? I mean, could it be? I doubt it. I'm skeptical. So I just think there's pieces you need to offload and pieces you need to bring in. And so be methodical, be deliberate, resolute about it. Don't panic. Winnings, well, if you can call it winning this year, interesting. It doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, they're still going to be on the golf course.
But it means something to the players because they know what it means to win. They need to win as many games as possible. This team needs to want to chase that high of winning hockey games.
Yeah, I think if the Senators are sellers at this year's deadline, again, we will have to have the conversation that this rebuild was a failure.
Yep.
And we will then have to talk about how similar this is to the Buffalo Sabres, who had to start a second rebuild in the midst of their first rebuild.
Yeah.
Are Senators fans ready to have that conversation? And I don't think they are. That would mean, I think, another 3 years minimum. That would mean one of the three core members of Stützle, Tkachuk, or Sanderson gone. Yeah. I think it would mean Chabot is gone. I think it would mean
you'd want to get it.
I mean, maybe Celebrini. Sure. Maybe he's here. He would play with maybe half the guys that are on this team right now. The rest are gone. That sucks. And this team has the potential. Even the guys who haven't been showing up, some of those bottom six guys, like I like Kostelic, I like Kelly. I think they have the potential to be something.
Mm-hmm.
The system that they've been playing in just hasn't worked well with their skill set. It hasn't been using them well. And they've suffered for that. Rourke Chartier, I talked about him a bunch at the beginning of the season. He's, kind of been useless for the last however long.
Well, he's been out for a month now.
Oh, has he? I missed that. He's been, when he was here, he was unnoticeable.
Yeah.
To the point where an injury like that didn't change a thing.
Yeah.
Nobody cared, really.
Yeah. Well, him and Kostelic got healthy as he got injured, so they just kind of swapped fourth line center spots, which
that's all the bottom six is right now. Is just replaceable parts.
Yeah.
And those players aren't that. They can be so much more. They can be very effective, I think, for a bottom six player.
Yeah.
If they're selling at the deadline, then we have to accept that the Senators have failed on their rebuild and it's start from fresh.
Yep. So the only thing I would say to that is, I hate to draw a comparison with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they went 10 years without making a playoffs, and there was no choice. They just had to endure that. And I guess the nagging doubt that I've got with this team is, you listen to Ottawa fans and they'll tell you, oh, the talent we have on this team. It's just wonderful, wonderful talent. If I'm Andlauer, I'd like to bring in really smart hockey people. And then what I'd want them to tell me is, do we have the talent here that lives up to the hype. And that's what I'm questioning.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I'm not averse to the idea of a breakdown and selling. I mean, I want a quick assessment. Do we have the talent I'm told that we have if I'm Landa and Lauer? That would be my approach.
Yeah. I don't hate that comparison to the Leafs, but when you look at the Leafs draft picks, who did they pick? They started that 10-year run with Tuukka Rask, who they traded away for Andrew Raycroft. But then yeah, they got Nazem Kadri. They would have got Morgan Riley, but they also drafted Tyler Biggs in the first round. They
And
drafted Stuart Percy in the first round.
Same year.
Luke Shen was a fifth overall pick. Yuri Tlusti, I believe he was top 10.
Oh, I thought he was top 20.
Maybe top 20. But that was one of those years they were missing the playoffs. So there's a lot of real big misses on that. And in Ottawa's rebuild, yeah, they've had some. They had Logan Brown. They've had Lassie Thompson, Jacob Bernard Dockers taking himself out of that conversation. Shane Bowers, it's wild. Mind you, Shane Bowers was 28th instead of yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I don't hate it. You talk about a lot of replaceable parts in the bottom six. How about we replace one with a defenseman? Erik Brannstrom has made his forward debut for the Ottawa Senators. He played really well. He was the Senators' best player as a fourth line left winger. He's done a fantastic job, and that whole fourth line I don't know what Brannstrom brought to that line, but it was insane. And then he almost got that 360 goal in front of the net at the end of the game. He was just so good. Now, a lot of reports are saying that he's not thrilled about being on forward instead of defense, but it's working, and I think I don't know what to expect from it. Paul, what do you make of the whole Brannstrom as the fourth line left winger situation?
Well, you touched on it, Jacob. How happy is he? I don't know if you saw that post-game interview with him. He was not happy about it, and came right out and said, I want to play D."
Yep.
So if he continues on the wing, there's going to have to be some adjustment on his part. I thought it was curious. I mean, how the hell he learns the morning of the game that he's going to left wing, and according to Brannstrom, he hasn't played forward in 14 years. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that when they decided to pull Forsberg right between periods. They didn't tell him. I get the sense it's I think I know why they're doing it. Shabbat's back, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no place to put Brannstrom. But then you get into a bunch of, if you think about it for a minute, is what they're really saying then that there's no place for him on the blue line?
Yeah, 100%.
So this is the larger issue. I've been told that Brannstrom's a wonderful defenseman and that's where he belongs. And all of a sudden, wait a minute, he's a winger. Well, no, you need to face up the problem that he's not good enough to be on your blue line.
Yeah.
And then when you put him at wing, what I found, if I were a Sens fan, a little annoying would be that, are you telling me you put Brannstrom on the wing? Are you telling me that he's the best option, that you're going to ignore everybody you've got in Belleville? You're going to ignore Crookshank and you're going to put him up there. I don't see the thought process behind this at all.
I do, because why not give him a shot? He's on the roster. The Sens are dealing. They don't have the cap space to call up Igor Sokolov or Roby Venti right now. They don't. They had to put Matthew Joseph's 2.95 just to be cap compliant with Shabbat coming back. They don't have the space to call anybody up right now. But unlike at the beginning of the year, they do have that extra almost $3 million. So they do have some extra players. Yuri Schmeichel and Angus Crookshank, which I think Crookshank and Schmeichel should be both in the lineup instead of Kelly and Castleck right now, or McEwen, I guess. But try him out, see how he does, and it paid off. He was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that's, if you don't want him on your blue line, then trade him.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's $2.5 million right there in free cap space. And then you can start bringing up some of these kids from the AHL, give them a chance. I mean, you got a whole year where basically the rest of the year doesn't count. And I take your point. You want to see them do well, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to the playoffs. So mix and match, experiments, make some trades, bring some of the kids up, give them a look. And if you need to get rid of Brannstrom to do it, if he's the block, trade him.
Yep. Dayton, what do you think of Erik Gretzky on forward? I mean, Erik Brannstrom.
A couple of things. I'll try to go through them here quickly. First, do you know of any defensemen who transitioned to forwards in the NHL? Because we all know of Brent Burns, right? Brent Burns was a defenseman. He was a forward and became a defenseman, right?
Yeah.
So we've seen that happen a couple of times. Have you seen it go the other way?
Not long term.
Are you sure?
Gotcha.
I know Brendan Smith. Brendan Smith goes back and forth a lot. He'll do full seasons. Okay. He'll go back and forth.
Yeah, the back and forth happens not as uncommon as you'd think.
I know Red Kelly switched. I don't know.
Yeah. Red Kelly was one of them. That's way back when. Have you heard of someone named Wendell Clark?
Yes.
He was drafted as a defenseman.
Yeah.
First overall. Transitioned to a left winger and found a huge level of success with the Leafs. Yeah. And maybe a little less so with other teams, but mainly with the Leafs. Nicholas Delarier, I believe, was a defenseman, became a forward.
I got two for you as well.
And I've also got Scott Walker, who was a defenseman in junior and with the Nashville Predators became a winger and had a pretty good career as a winger. So it's not super rare to have a defenseman transition while in professional hockey to a forward. And, necessity breeds innovation or breeds invention, right? Yeah. If this is what needed to happen because of the cap space, and which other defenseman are you putting on forward because there's no room? You're not putting Hamonic. That would be a disaster. Shabbat, Sanderson, Chychrun, and Zub need to be on defense. And who else is there?
Yeah.
Bernard Docker, he's also pure defense.
Yeah.
You got to keep those guys there. So Brannstrom's the odd guy out, even though he's made some great progress as a defender.
Yep.
He can also score. And I bet you his tune will change if he gets a goal.
Yeah.
Scoring changes a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
So I don't know. If this works, keep doing it. Looked like it was set up for the game against Vancouver again. So that's awesome. Keep doing it until it doesn't work and then figure out a new solution. Don't force it. The Senators have a habit of forcing it. But if it's working, do it. If it's not, change it. Yep. I don't know. It's fun.
Yep.
Well, Martin's going to have to give him a big hug because he did not look happy in that.
No, he was not pleased. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But score a goal, probably feel a little better.
Sure.
Yeah. Now I'll give you three more names right before we take a quick break here. Dustin Byfuglien, drafted as a forward, switched to defenseman. And obviously that was a life-changing switch for him. I couldn't imagine him playing forward. He'd be worse than Reeves. Andrei Markov, he was drafted as a centerman and developed and became a fantastic defenseman. And this one was mostly just due to injuries, but who was it? Sergei Fedorov. He played on defense a lot. He was like, if there was an injury, let's put Fedorov on defense. And Brendan Shanahan said if he was a full-time defenseman, he would win a bajillion Norris trophies. He would be the best defenseman in the league. So it happens. It's not very common.
But less uncommon than you'd think, right?
Right, exactly. It happens. And you look at Brendan Smith. I think he's the biggest example of this, in today's NHL, of players that will go back and forth. So, Yeah, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna talk about a little bit of goaltending when we come back, and yeah, we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So last thing we're gonna really touch on here is the struggling net minding that Ottawa has had this year. Anton Forsberg and Jonas Korpisalo have been miserable. They both had some great games. They've both gone like two periods and been Patrick Waugh in his prime, but then let in 4 goals in the third period. Or usually that happens in the second period, and they have a great first and third period. Um, what do you do at this point? Like they're taking up almost $6 million between the two of them, or almost $7 million between the two of them. You don't have the cap space to call up Sogard and let one sit a couple games. Um, you don't really want to waive either of them either. What do you do in this situation? Do you just ride it out because some of they do have their good stretches, or do you try and find a trade partner? You're not going to trade Korpisalo, so do you try and move on from Forsberg, who's arguably been the better goalie, make room for Sogard and give him a shot? I don't know what to do here. I'm stumped. I bet you are both stumped. 20,000 people that go to Senators games every night, they're stumped. Paul, what do you think? What's the first move, or what is the move that Ottawa has to make right now?
Yeah, I'll tell you, they're in a jam. Korpisalo, okay. I agree with you. From my perspective, I don't who would take him? I mean, he's under contract for what is it? 5 years?
Four after this one at 4 million.
4 million. You're gonna have a hell of a time trying to unload him on anybody.
Yeah.
But you could see that, and it kind of makes me question Dorion, as if there weren't enough questions about him. But I
I was
remember
going
when
to say
he,
kind of.
yeah,
If
well,
that's what's making you question him, you need to go back 5 years and
well, I wrote a piece in the summer, it was entitled "Senators Could Regret Korpisalo Signing," and
yeah,
I remember, you know, Dorion was absolutely gushing about the guy, and he was credited with having solved the Ottawa Senators' problems. I was like, no, what are you talking about? This guy he's never been a bona fide, in my view, number one goalie anywhere, and
yeah,
he's just plagued by inconsistency. You've seen it throughout the season. So I'm afraid you're stuck with him.
yeah.
Forsberg, yeah, he's not a hell of a lot better. I looked at their stats; they're both below 900. I think the league average on a save percentage is 900. They're both below it. And in fact, relative to their careers this year on goals against and save percentage, they've actually regressed.
Yep.
It's shocking, really, because when you look at it, I did the math. If you look at their last 32 games, they have seen 17 of those games where they've let in 4 goals or more. You can't win in this league when you let in 4 goals or more. And that's the story of the Senators goaltending. I guess, the only way out of this, in answer to your question, uh, deal Forsberg and then you can bring Silgard up. I think his cap hits $925,000 or something. So you've got the room there. And then he's an RFA this year at the end of this season.
Yep.
So you're gonna have to deal with that at that time. So
Yep.
I can't see any other way around it, really.
Yep.
But
Go ahead.
well, but I was just wondering, I know they got tons of problems, but of all the fires that are burning on Steve Staios' desk, is this one he has to put out? Given that you're not going to make the playoffs, maybe you just hope like hell one of them improves and becomes an NHL caliber goaltender.
Yep. And I mean, like, I think trading Forsberg would be pretty easy. What does he make? 3.35, I believe. Um, the New Jersey Devils need a goalie. They got $9 million in cap space with Dougie Hamilton out.
Mm.
I could see them targeting somebody like Forsberg. I wonder if even Toronto would have a look. Right now, they're running. Who are they running? Martin Jones and Dennis Hildeby. Like, come on. There are teams looking for goalies right now. Right now, we're talking about Jake Allen and Mackenzie Blackwood being like the top options in the league. right? Forsberg slides right in there, if not at the top. So there's definitely taker for him. Although, so both goalies in Ottawa have a 890 save percentage. Forsberg has a 3.11 goals against average, and Korpisalo is letting in half a goal more per game than that. But Forsberg has a positive record. He's 7-6-0. So I don't think you can move on from him. I don't know what the answer is. Do you, Dayton?
Well, I think we're focusing on the wrong question. I think, well, there's no question that the two Senators goalies have been two of the worst goalies in the NHL this year. I think looking at like their combined record, they're the bottom. There's no other team with two goalies that has performed worse.
Yeah.
There's other goalies that have performed worse individually, not together.
Yeah.
That's bad. And so a lot of, blame and finger pointing has come towards the goalies, and it's not undeserved.
Yep.
Why is this how it works though, right? Cam Talbot was supremely awful last year.
Yep.
Like just terrible. He's now in LA and doing fantastic. How does that work? Philip Gustafson was okay in Ottawa, had a good start, then kind of like, I don't know, looked okay. Went to Minnesota and was like a Vezina candidate. And maybe not so great this year, but still better than the other two that the Senators got right now. We can skip Matt Murray because there was injury concerns with that. Craig Anderson at the end of his career has, kind of fallen off. Like he's done. Let's send him to Washington. Washington, he looks surprisingly good. Buffalo, he looks amazing.
Yeah.
How is it that every Senators goalie in the past 5 years leaves Ottawa and then goes on to be fantastic?
Yep.
That tells me that it's not a goalie problem. That's a system problem.
Yep.
This is coaching. This is goaltending coaching. This is defense. This is how the team plays.
Yeah.
And so you can trade all the goalies you want, and you're going to go and watch them become great goalies elsewhere. Guaranteed. If Forsberg is traded to the Devils, Devils will suddenly have a good goaltender because we've seen
he will win the
Forsberg.
Conn Smythe.
Maybe, yeah, right? We've seen Forsberg be a fantastic goalie for short stretches of time.
Yep.
The Devils are asking somebody to be a great goalie for a short stretch of time.
Yep.
That's what they will get if Forsberg is traded there. Korpisalo has been a good goalie for a short period of time. Inconsistencies, sure. But he's proven that he's talented in short periods. Same with Sogard. You bring him up, you're going to get the exact same thing. Yep. He's been great in the minors. He's been great in very brief appearances. He's going to look exactly the same as everyone else because it's a coaching and system issue. Jacques Martin is working on it. It doesn't change overnight. Bring in someone like Berube, I don't know. I think maybe you have a different response.
Ottawa's best stretch of hockey, best 2 months of hockey last year, they used 7 different goalies.
Yeah, because you can come in and play good one game, or 2 games, and then all of a sudden it's fallen apart because there's some sort of broken piece in the Senators system. I don't think it's the goalies.
Yeah, so I think fair point there, Dayton. I harken back to a point we were discussing earlier. Do you want the Senators firing on all cylinders for the rest of the season? Answer yes. And one of the reasons you do is you're going to get a glimpse. If you can straighten that defense core around, you're going to get some understanding or insight into just how good Forsberg and Korpisalo are. And answer your question, is it a goalie problem or a defensive system problem?
The only thing I'll add to that is that probably 2.5 weeks ago when I checked, this might have changed by now, but Ottawa was right around middle of the pack in expected goals against per 60. Obviously, they had a lot less games than everybody, but per 60, they had, I think it was the 14th most expected goals against. So they weren't letting those high danger chances come in. Now, I don't know if that accounts for Erik Brannstrom can't push somebody in front of the net, if that's supposed to be a low danger shot, and doesn't carry very much weight in that category. I don't know how all of that is accounted for, but they were middle of the pack for expected goals against and bottom of the league in goals saved above expected. So I don't know who's expecting it and what they pull into account, but it's right around there.
Well, I'll make a little comparison here for you. Just kind of as do we have another topic after this?
No, this will wrap things up.
Okay, I'll keep this one brief then. I'm sure we're all aware of Canada's loss in the World Juniors. Very sad. I watched the game. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the tournament, I wrote a piece about Canada's goaltending situation. And, their projected starter, Matisse Rousseau, had, some really great stretches in the pre-tournament, but also was, prone to letting in a couple of soft ones.
Yeah.
So there was an inconsistency issue. Canada decided to ride Rousseau the whole tournament, which I think was a mistake. You can't give a goaltender with those inconsistency issues a huge stretch. Kind of like the Senators are relying so heavily on some of their goalies.
Yep.
And then you watch that game against Czechia, and Canada their defense was putting in turnovers. They were screening the goalie, which we know is a problem for Rousseau. Can't handle the screen, so maybe just get out of the way. There was a system issue that didn't support their goalie, and all of a sudden, Czechia is up 2-0 and squeezes in a last second goal to win the game. Canada played pretty good for half the game, but fell apart when they needed it most. And is that not the Senators' season?
100%.
Yeah.
That's a system problem.
Even down to, in the preseason, both goalies looked great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know the strengths and weaknesses of the goalies.
Yeah.
The teams do, the fans do, the coaches do. They should know. Support that. Stop doing the turnovers. I'd love to see what the turnover rate and some of the giveaways are for the Senators. I'd imagine they'd be on the higher end. And so you're not maybe giving up more goals than many teams, but what are those chances like? And when are they coming? And where is the collapse happening? That's, like I said, not a goaltender issue. That's a system issue.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's a huge conversation to have. I'm sure that we could go down rabbit holes and look up these stats support this, these stats support this. And it's a conversation worth having, or writing about, or just thinking about on your own. You got to look at both sides. You can't just say, "Oh, these goalies suck, ship them away." And that's kind of how I phrased the question. But I was more so asking if that's what you do. But no, you have to look at both sides. You have to say the defensive system is a problem. So is the goaltending. Where's the happy medium and how do you fix it?
Hopefully we can find an answer soon, eh?
I don't know who has it. I don't know if it's Jacques Martin. I don't know if it's Craig Berube. I don't know if it's Zach Burke. I don't know who's going to have the answer, but somebody's got to. Or they won't, and Ottawa goes into a Buffalo Sabres second rebuild.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have we talked about Zach Burke? That his brother is the lead singer for
Rush.
Not Rush.
No, not Rush.
Skid Row. That's what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
a fun trivia fact that I like bringing up.
It is very cool. Yeah.
Guys, Dave Poulin has all the answers. He had all the answers on TSN. Put your faith in him. He'll
fantastic.
You know who else is a pretty smart guy? Pierre Maguire. Let's bring him in.
Yeah.
That was the worst year of Senators ever. Yeah. You look at everything that happened. There was a 12-month stretch of just everything falling apart, and it somehow coincided with the Maguire signing.
Well, and so
he was better on TSN too.
So people say that it was Maguire that made the Travis Hamonic deal, that they wanted a 4th-round pick, but Ottawa didn't have, so they said, "Here's a 3rd." I don't understand that. Yeah. All right, so we're going to wrap things up now. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. We'll have some more stuff to talk about. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about PWHL Ottawa, see how their first week goes, and talk a little bit about how their league is running, because there's a lot of interesting things that I definitely want to talk about. We won't make it too much of the show for next week, but we will gloss on it. So look out for that. Yeah, thanks for checking this episode out. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, give us some support, and take care, everybody. See you next week.